Alhamdulillah. Oh, that was my daughter just coming home. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, ready when you are.
All right. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you guys are all doing well. So today we're continuing on with the tafsir of Surah Yusuf, amongst the most beautiful surahs in the Quran, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shares the most beautiful story. And in Surah Yusuf, we hear so many different lessons, and it can connect to almost anything that we come across in our lifetime. And even though Yusuf Islam's time was so long ago, we could still find us relating to a lot of things that he experienced, whether it's with concepts of siblings and jealousy, dealing with parents and how to be towards our parents, whether it's going through hardship after hardship and how to handle them, and just really having that trust and that submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we actually are on verse 54 through 57, which is the chapter that is chapter 7, which is calling the transformation. It's called the transformation, which was between Yusuf and the king. And we talked about the verses before this was how the inmate of Yusuf salam, when he was in prison, was working under the king, and the king had a dream, and he wanted to get this dream interpreted because he kept getting this dream, and it was a very clear dream. And that's when the prisoner that was in prison with Yusuf salam remembered Yusuf salam for interpreting his dream, and that's when he asked the king's permission to go and visit him. We also talked about the story itself and how Yusuf salam, he wanted to clear his name, and we talked about how patient he was, that after he spent in the tafsir saying 7 to 8 years in prison at this time, he wouldn't leave the prison or even go talk to the king without having the story revealed. And he asked the king to go ask the women of the town and the women that cut their hands about him. And so he got himself cleared by doing so, and he wouldn't leave the prison until that was done. So the king was amazed with him, and through the experience we can see the how patient he was. His patience was astonishing. And it kind of gets us to understand how important our reputation is, how important we should fight for our reputation and clear our reputation, and to be patient and really submit to Allah and trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his plan. We did talk about the 3 types of souls that are kind of depicted from the last part of the verse that we went through, 53. And it talks about the nafs al-mutma'inna, the nafs al-lawama, and the nafs al-amra bis-su, which talks about the 3 different souls. And you'll see that sometimes we even fluctuate between those souls. So it's not like where I'm one way, you're another way. No, sometimes you're going to be between all 3 different types, but one may be dominant more than the other. So when we go into today, which is verse 54 through 57, let me read the translation. It says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And the king said, "Bring him to me that I may attach him to my person." Then when he spoke to him, he said, "Verily this day you are with us high in rank and fully trusted." Yusuf salam said, "Set me over the storehouses of the land, and I will indeed guard them with full knowledge, as a minister of finance in Egypt, in place of Al-Aziz, who was dead at the time. Thus did we give full authority to Yusuf salam in the land, to take possession therein as when or where he likes. We bestow of our mercy on whom we please, and we make not to be lost the reward of al-muhsinun, the good doers." So in 57 it says, "And verily the reward of the hereafter is better for those who believe and used to fear Allah and keep their duty to him, by abstaining from all kinds of sins and evil deeds, and by performing all kinds of righteous good deeds." So subhanallah, in the beginning of going into the tafsir of 54 through 57, the king was very impressed with Yusuf alayhi salam, and he called for him and he chose him as a personal advisor. So okay, so he was in prison, he interpreted the dream, and he pretty much, the king wanted him to get out of the jail so he could meet him. Yusuf alayhi salam did not want to leave until his reputation was cleared. And the king actually did what he asked him to ask the women about the story. That pretty much announced to the world his innocence, that he didn't fornicate, nor did he try to with any woman, even the wife of Al-Aziz. And that's when he felt free to felt the desire to leave the prison. So when he went to the king was very impressed with him, and he actually trusted him, and he pretty much gave him like a high position, and he wanted him as a personal advisor to him. So at this point, the king has not yet seen or spoken to him, but he still appoints him because he sees what he can kind of tell the personality of Yusuf alayhi salam by looking at how patient he was and how kind of righteous he was and what type of person he was through his character, by not even, lying or cheating or even exaggerating or even wanting freedom when he deserved all the freedom that he should have, just so until he cleared his reputation, subhanallah. So when Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam came, he spoke to him and he immediately realized that he was a very trustworthy person. And subhanallah, before I move on with this, is that one of the main attributes we should have, and two of the attributes that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he highlights, okay, he highlights and then he says overall good character, because there's so many good attributes in having good character and mannerisms, but he highlights being truthful and being trustworthy. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ highlighted those specific attributes, as we know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is known as Al-Sadiq Al-Amin. So he carries those two among the other attributes of good character. And so did Yusuf alayhi salam. He was a very trustworthy and truthful person. And that's something the king picked up on real quick. So a person who is humble should not ask for leadership unless he knows that he is the only one capable of taking the role. So in the verses, we see that when he took him in as a personal advisor, Yusuf alayhi salam asks for a specific position. So Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam knew that Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam knew that in all of Egypt, there was no one that could be of assistance during the drought except him, since he was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger, one, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him that wisdom and that knowledge to be able to do such a thing. Like the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the ability to interpret the dreams. So if Yusuf alayhi salam interprets the dream and he sees that there's 7 prosperous years, and then following the 7 prosperous years, there's going to be 7 years of drought, and how to maintain the finances through those prosperous years and through the years of suffering and drought, then he's going to be able to handle that way better than anyone else. At the same time, we know that Yusuf alayhi salam drew up his own conclusion that after the 7 prosperous years and the 7 years of drought, there will be it would be prosperous again. So he was wise in analyzing the knowledge that he had, and that's through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, why did Yusuf ask for such a position? Because he knew he was the best one at that fact, because he was Allah's messenger. He knew the interpretation of the dream, and that he was given that knowledge and wisdom by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, stopping at this point, like you see nowadays, so many people, they rush to certain positions, whether it's a leadership role in the masjid, a leadership role in the community, a leadership role in our workplaces. But sometimes before we even think of the leadership role and the pros that come with the leadership role, we have to look at what are the amanat with that role. Like, what are the things that we're going to be held accountable for? So are we able to do that position? Are we going to have a hard time being just and fair and equal and trying our best to do what's right? Are we the best candidate? Do we have the right amount of knowledge? Do we have a good sense of wisdom? Do we know do we have that skill? Now, if we have that skill, there's nothing wrong with the person stepping up to the plate and fulfilling that need. But if we're not, and we just want positions, and we just want more money, and we just want more power, then we're going to end up doing a lot of damage. So if you are the right person for a specific position, don't shy away from it. That is not being humble. That is actually, you can actually put your community or your workplace or organization in a very sensitive and damaging position. So there was once a story that I would like to share. So there was a woman that I knew, and she was a board member of a mosque, and she was very active. She had very good insight. She can give for a school. It wasn't for the masjid. It was more for an Islamic school. And she had even she was a parent of the school, a donor of the school, and she was on the board. But because somebody was challenging her and they wanted her to step down so they can be on the board, she felt the need to, I don't want to argue with that person. I don't want anybody to think that I'm dying for this seat. And she ended up giving it up to a person that didn't have the same sincerity towards the school, didn't put in the same amount of effort and knowledge and wisdom in the school, and it did affect. So subhanallah, we have a responsibility, and if we can do a job, then we shouldn't be shying away from it. But if there's somebody better, then we shouldn't be also so prideful to step down from that position. So this is why Yusuf alayhi salam, he asked for this specific role, because it was going to be a very intense role. At the same time, whoever took it needed to be trustworthy and know what they're doing. Otherwise, it can put the whole country at risk. So, subhanAllah, this is the key when we're dealing with our roles. Now, Prophet Yusuf salam asked to be placed in what? In charge of maintenance of the products of the harvest. So it was the minister of treasury. So he was in charge of the finances. He stated that he would guard the harvest because he wanted to benefit the people, even though it was a non-Muslim society. He was the only Muslim at the time in Egypt. The rest Muslims, the rest were like idol worshippers and didn't submit to one God. So if a Muslim can reach a level through which he can offer something beneficial to society, he should. It's not just like to Muslims that you should offer your good services. There's some Muslims that think that, I'll do good to the Muslim community, I'll do good for the masjid or the Islamic school. But when they go outside the Islamic arena, they think they can cut corners and they can do something wrong and take from the things that's not theirs. And that's not the case. Actually, if you have any benefit to society, you should fulfill it. And he should do it regardless of whether it is towards a Muslim or non-Muslim society, okay, or person. And at this point in time, and through this position, Prophet Yusuf salam was not the king, but he was actually more powerful than the king because he had control of the finances. He was able to be more, his position was right now more powerful than the king's. So he was in charge of something that the people needed the most, which was food. And through this position, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he established him as the most influential and trusted person in Egypt. Most influential and trusted person in Egypt and its surrounding areas, subhanAllah. So after the first 7 years of abundance passed, 7 years of drought prevailed. And the drought affected some of the surrounding areas, including Palestine, where Prophet Yusuf salam's family resided. Like when we talk about Yaqub salam and his other sons, they were in what we called old times called Sham, but it was Palestine. So due to Yusuf salam's excellence in maintaining the supplies, there was even enough available. Okay, so even there was in the drought years enough food available for Egypt to sell food, okay, to the surrounding land. So subhanallah, it was like a trade. So not only did he uphold Egypt and keep it sustained and maintained, he was able to provide the other lands through trade and through selling of of the food to the surrounding lands that needed it as well through the drought. So when a person is sincere and does something solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so for Allah's sake, without desiring any benefits in this life, so there's no strings attached, absolutely no strings attached, he will see the fruits of his actions in this life and the next. And this is, I want us to really just pause for a second and see everything that we do in this world. Whether it's we're doing it for our parents, we're doing it for our spouse, we're doing it for our children, we're doing it for our neighbor, we're doing it for our colleague or our employer, we're doing it for a classmate, whoever we're doing it for, even just in the street, we're just doing something good. If we're doing something good, we should always do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having Allah in mind, having Allah up front and center, and know that we don't want any worldly benefits. So if we do something good for somebody, yes, I understand that normal good mannerisms is for someone to be thankful and appreciative and, even go a step more than that, right? And show the appreciation. But they don't have to. And that's not something we should live for. That's not something we should be expecting. And that's not something that will make us judge if we want to do that same good act again or not. So if we do something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means we want Allah to recognize it, Allah to write it down, Allah to accept it, Allah to give us good rewards for it. And we want Allah's barakah. We want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us those blessings for doing those things that please Him the most. Okay? So it's not worth doing anything unless it's sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the joy of doing that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you the fruits of those actions in this world and the next, subhanAllah. So however, those who believe and have taqwa will receive even better in the hereafter. These good deeds and this sincerity is going to only increase us in the hereafter and make us have a better outcome, a better result in the hereafter. So patience and staying away from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden will be rewarded multiple-fold and multifold in the hereafter as well. So patience is not only patience in hardship, by the way. Patience is in hardship, and then we also need patience in not doing or just following our desires and not doing something wrong. Knowing the fact that we may want to do that, we love doing that, maybe we're addicted to doing that, but because we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala far more than we love this bad deed, then we're going to be patient and not doing it because it's going to be hard. It's going to be like a jihad. So it is a hardship. It's not easy to stay away from something that's sinful, knowing the fact that we may like it or enjoy it, subhanAllah. So it's fighting of the nafs, and we need patience in doing that as well. And that's when we actually will get more rewards, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that you're struggling on His behalf, that you're struggling to really do good and show Him that type of love. So continuing on, we're going to start now. That concludes chapter 7, and we're going into chapter 8, which is titled The Reunion. This is the reunion between Yusuf a.s. and his brothers. So starting off with verse 58, it says, "And the brothers of Yusuf a.s. came seeking food, and they entered upon him, and he recognized them, but he was to them unknown. And when he had furnished them with their supplies, he said, Bring me a brother of yours from your father. Do not you see that I give full measure, and that I am best in accommodations? But if you do not bring him to me, no measure will be there hereafter for you from me, nor will you approach me." They said, "We will attempt to dissuade his father from keeping him, and indeed we will do it." And Yusuf a.s. said to his servants, "Put their merchandise into their saddle bags, so they might recognize it when they have gone back to their people, that perhaps they will return again." So subhanAllah, starting off with verse 58, this is where, like I said, it's in the middle of the drought. Yusuf took care of the food so well that during the drought they had enough for themselves and enough to give away, to give away through trade. Okay. Now the surrounding land started to come and do trading. So people would come and get some things to trade, merchandise to trade, and they would trade for a bag of ration, bag of food. And they would go back and take it to their families. And this is where Yusuf alayhi salam has the opportunity, and he sees his brothers as they walk in. So the drought has affected the surrounding areas of Egypt as well, and the people from all around were coming to Egypt for food. The king of Egypt benefited greatly from this, because when the people came for food, they weren't just given the food, they traded their goods for food. Amongst those who came seeking food were Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers, subhanAllah. And in Ayah 58, Yusuf alayhi salam recognizes his brothers. He sees them, he knows them. When he left them, he was a kid. But when his brothers left him and did that to him, they were already older and they were adults. So he noticed them. They were already shaped in who they looked like. Okay. Now, but they didn't recognize him. Since Yusuf alayhi salam was much younger than him, than his brothers, he recognized them right away, but he would remember their faces, but they didn't recognize him at all, because he was very young when they threw him in the well. When they put him in the well, he was young, and then with years he changed. So it's kind of like looking at, I don't know, looking at a 6-year-old boy or a 7-year-old boy or 8-year-old boy, okay, and you see certain features of him, correct? But once he becomes a little bit older, the face starts to form a different way, the hair starts to grow a different way, the face structure starts to really be defined, and it's going to be hard. So if I had, say for example, a niece or a friend's son that lives overseas, and when I seen him, he was that young, and when I go back several years later, 10 years later, to see him, like, oh my God, that's him, that's Muhammad, I didn't even recognize him, subhanAllah. So this is how the scenario was between Yusuf alayhi salam and his brothers. He recognized them when he seen them, but they did not recognize him. So the word munkirun in Ayah 58 means to reject. For example, the idea comes to one's mind, but it is pushed aside and rejected. Now, the idea came to the brother's mind that the person in authority looked similar to Yusuf alayhi salam, but given this man's position, right? We know Yusuf alayhi salam has a high position in Egypt. He's not from Egypt, but they don't know that. So he has a high position, and what happened to Yusuf? They just dismissed this thought right away. They didn't even. So at first the brothers were like, it kind of looks like Yusuf, but they took it out of their mind right away, because obviously the position of the man, where he is, and how everything turned out. So, but given this man's position, they pushed that thought aside, because it seemed impossible that he would be Yusuf alayhi salam, subhanAllah. They assumed that the greatest chance, if he was still alive, that he would probably be a slave somewhere, due to how they left him. They said, even if we come across him, best case scenario, he's probably alive and he's a slave in somebody's home. Like, they never thought this to be their brother. So another important point is that before this time, Yusuf alayhi salam did not seek to find his family. Like, so we're looking at the time he left to the time they seen him now. We're looking at, I don't know, well, when he was younger, so say for example, then going into the house of Aziz and then being in prison for about 8 years. So we're looking at, he's in his 20s right now. And this was, I would say, it was a good maybe 15 years past, if not a little bit more. So you're looking at between 15 to 18 years, something like this, that passed. So Yusuf alayhi salam, when he left the prison, right? Yeah, even more than that, because you're looking at the years he spent with Aziz, then he went to the prison, and after the prison, he surpassed the 7 years of of blessings, pretty much. And then now they're in the 7 years of drought. So you're looking at a period of time, quite period of time, that he got out of the prison. Now, since Yusuf got out of that prison and he was actually in a high position, he didn't seek to find his family, you know? So another important point is that before this time, Yusuf did not seek to find his family and brothers, despite the position he was in and the ability he had to do so, because he was the prophet. And as such, prophets do not act on their own accord. So once they're prophets, they only act on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks them to do. So when you look at ayah 56 and 60, here Yusuf wants to make sure that everyone is treated justly. He doesn't want, one family to take more than the other. Ration per family is a ration per family, same amount and everything. So he wants to make sure that everyone is treated justly. He wants to make sure that everyone gets their fair share of the goods. And he begins when his brothers come to by inquiring about them, their situation, and how many they are in number. So he wants to know, how many are you guys? How many families versus just the brothers themselves? So they tell him that they have one more brother, though, that's not with them at home with their father. And which brother is he talking about here? He's talking about Benjamin. This is Yusuf Islam's brother, from both mother and father. So Benjamin is not, so this is when Yusuf Islam notices that his youngest brother, Benjamin, is not with the other brothers who have come to Egypt, all the way to Egypt, and he makes a plan so he can get them to bring him on the next time. He wants to create something that they bring him next time, okay? Now, Yusuf tells his brothers to bring Benjamin next time because they claim they have another brother, which means another family and another bag of ration. And he claims that he wants to make sure they are all telling the truth and that they are not spies, because Egypt was very, very prosperous at this time, despite the drought. So they were in really good hands. Like Yusuf put Egypt in a very strong stand. Now in verse 61, here the brothers conclude that bringing Benjamin to Egypt is not going to be an easy task, because obviously they have Yaqub their father, is not going to trust them with Benjamin, because when he finally trusted them with Yusuf look what they did to Yusuf. Obviously many years now have passed and Benjamin is now a little boy, but still Yaqub was very protective over them. And since he experienced this thing with Yusuf and the brothers, he wasn't going to be easy to convince to allow Benjamin to come back with them on the next journey. So the brothers know that Yaqub will not easily let Benjamin travel with them to Egypt. He will remember what happened in the past, as he never forgot it, and he will guard against being bitten twice by the same snake. Now, what I want to mention here is even Yaqub when he had this experience with his sons, we've seen how fatherly, how loving he was. He didn't accuse his sons. He didn't call them liars. He didn't belittle them. He didn't throw them out. He didn't shun them. He was very cordial with them and very, the way he dealt with them was in a beautiful manner, right? But he knew never to put himself in a situation, never to get bit by the same snake. So it's kind of like us now when we have siblings, when we have friends, and we do good by them and we trust them, right? But for some reason, they break that trust that we experience with them. So even if we want to mend that relationship and be on good terms with them, right? I would recommend, and so from the behavior of Yaqub is mend that relationship. You can fix even that relationship, but don't get bit twice by the same snake. Meaning, if you trusted them with something, don't just forgive and let go and then say, hey, I'm going to trust you with the same thing again. Because you don't want that to happen again. Now, SubhanAllah, that's how we grow. We forgive each other, but be cautious, because obviously the mistake was done through vulnerability and weakness. So if I know I can't trust somebody, doesn't mean I can't have a relationship with them, but I'll be mindful of what I say and what I do and what I give to that person. If it is in fact a trusting issue. Okay, so even regardless who that is, if it's a sibling or a friend or a community member, what that is. So try your best that when you are wronged or something bad happens to you from somebody, is not to get bit by the same snake again. Meaning, don't learn from your mistakes. Really learn from your mistakes. Now he will feel, with remembering what happened to Yusuf salam, Yaqub salam will fear the same for Benjamin, that which happened to Yusuf salam, and he was hurt by what happened. But at the same time, like, what can he do? What can he specifically do when his sons acted that way? So also Yaqub salam did not send Benjamin with the other brothers the first time, because like Yusuf salam, Benjamin was so precious to Yaqub salam. And Yaqub salam was very protective over Benjamin, especially after the incident that happened with Yusuf salam. So however, the brothers say they will try to do their best to bring their youngest brother the next time around. The brothers say this because they realize that they must bring him to Egypt, otherwise they will not get ration anymore. They won't get ration for their families, and they're not going to get ration for Benjamin and their father. So Israelite narrations report that at this time, their family consisted of 70 members. 70 members. All the brothers had grown up with families of their own. None of them had, they all had their own families at this point. It's grown. And had to take care of their wives and their children. So everybody, when they came, they had their own bag of ration, which will be enough for who? Them and their families, their wives and their children. So therefore, they must convince their father to send Benjamin for the survival of their families during this drought. Now, the last verse 62, is this ayah tells us that Prophet Yusuf salam returns his brother's merchandise with them, without the brothers knowing. So when they were filling the bags, he told his people, Yusuf salam told the guys filling up the bags to put their merchandise on the bottom of the bags and then put the food, the ration. So the Prophet Yusuf salam tells his people to put this merchandise for his brothers that they brought for trading deep in the sacks of food. They are getting back whatever they paid for the ration. So he doesn't want to take anything, but he knows they probably have little, so he wants to ensure that they come back. So the scholars say the reason for this is that Prophet Yaqub salam and his children must be in a great state of need or hunger due to the drought for them to even come all the way to Egypt if they need food. Okay, so obviously they're in a desperate state. Okay, now therefore they are bringing everything they have to trade for ration due to their great need for food. So he felt like if he didn't give them back their merchandise, they would not be able to come back without having anything to trade. So they wouldn't come back. So if Prophet Yusuf salam takes everything, they will not return, since they will not have anything to trade with. Now, Yusuf salam also does this in order to ensure that the brothers do return back to Egypt, and they make the effort to come back with Benjamin. Now, when we talk about ration is a fixed amount of a commodity officially allotted to each person during a time of shortage, such as war times or droughts, like in this situation was happening in Egypt. Now, we can, I'm not sure on the time, but I want to see if we can continue. We have 15 minutes. What I can do is I will continue to 63, and then we'll conclude hopefully with there. So going on with the next part, 63 through 68, but I'm just going to go verse by verse because I'll probably end within a verse or two. So when they returned to their father, they said, "Oh, our father, for this measure has been denied to us. So send with us our brother, that we will be given measure. So in verse 63, the brothers returned to Palestine to convince Yaqub salam to send Benjamin with them to Egypt the next time around. Now in 63, as soon as they returned, they went straight to their father. They went straight to their father and lied, saying that they were denied ration because Benjamin was not with them. They lied because they were afraid that their father would not allow their brother to go with them to Egypt for more ration. So ironically, they used the same exact promise they used with Yusuf salam, by saying, we will be his guardians. We will be his guardians. Now, I will end at this because Yaqub salam, as much as he tried to convince his sons, as they pushed him to take Yusuf alayhi salam to play and to have fun and eat and drink, he kept making excuses why he didn't want to. And what did the brothers say? The brothers said, his sons said, that we will be his guardians. We will not let anything harm him. We will be with him every step of the way. And how dare we come back without him? Then we would be surely losers if we can't guard him or protect him, subhanAllah. And when they came back to convince him about Benjamin, they used the same line. And they said, we will be his guardians, subhanAllah. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who really benefit from the story of Yusuf salam and the many other stories in the Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who read the Quran, who recite the Quran, who memorize the Quran, who act on the Quran, and live our life according to this Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to beautify our character as He's beautified the character of His beloved prophets, especially our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us beneficial knowledge, increase us in knowledge, and make us amongst the wise. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us any and all of our shortcomings, the ones that we're aware of and the ones that we're not, the ones we do publicly and the ones that we do privately, the major ones and the minor ones. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us His love and the love of those who love Him, and the love of every deed that will bring us closer to His love. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.